Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to episode 271, part 2 of our 18-year property cycle special. We make some bold predictions this week. There's talk of flying cars, there's talk of the future of TV scheduling, but also there's economic crashes, there's boom times, and we tell you all the investment locations you need to be paying attention to.
Yes, welcome to the Property Podcast, where every single Thursday, property investors come together to get informed and inspired. Sometimes that information is tactical and it gives you some quick wins, but other times, like today, it gives you a whole different way of thinking about property and the economy in general. We laid the groundwork for this 2 weeks ago with Ray Dalio's Economic Machine. We ran through the first part of the property cycle last week, and today we're going to be pulling it all together. We're going to be covering a lot, we'll be making some big bets, you'll want to be paying attention.
So we have an interesting news story for you this week, and actually this story's been circling for a little while, but we thought we'd surface it because of our recent episode on interest rates. We were talking about how it really is so difficult to forward predict interest rates, and how the advice on where they're going seems to be changing month to month. And Rob, this story from the BBC shows that is absolutely the case. Earlier this year it looked nailed on for interest rate rises, and now maybe nothing for the rest of the year.
Yeah, at one point it was looking almost guaranteed for May. The markets had priced it in. Every commentator would say, yeah, rates are definitely going up this time, but not the case. In fact, when the Monetary Policy Committee voted on it, it was 7-2 in favour of keeping rates where they are. So not even close, really, which is good news for me, because my prediction of no rate rises this year is looking a little bit iffy, but I'm hoping to at least get into the back end of the year without being proven wrong. But possibly not such good news for the wider economy, because the whole point of interest rates is that you lower them to stimulate activity. And at the moment, there's practically nowhere for them to go. So if there is any bad news coming out of Brexit, and of course, at some point, as we're going to talk about today, things will take a serious downturn, they need to get rates back up before those things happen, so there is room for them to come down again. At the moment, it's just not happening. All right, what a treat. We get to talk about the 18-year property cycle for the second week in a row. So hopefully you listened to last week's episode. That was the safe one. We're talking about what's gone before and mapping that onto the 18-year property cycle. Today, the risky bit, as we look at what the property cycle suggests might be about to play out over the coming years.
So, to summarise so far, we began in 2008 when the economy crashed, house prices were falling and the world was ending. Or so it seemed. And over the next few years, interest rates were slashed and this stimulated the economy. So then from around 2011 to 2015, things started to slowly get back on track thanks to various measures, making that a deleveraging. And London did pretty good during that period of time. 2015 onwards, the market has peaked in the south a little and it's beginning to simmer. And in the 18-year property cycle, it's referred to as a wobble, where we are right now. So Rob and I are going to be bold in this time of uncertainty and make predictions for the rest of the property cycle, year by year. Strap yourselves in.
2019.
Yeah, so 2019, no flying cars, still self-driving cars, maybe. Property-wise, well, we're still probably going to be in dip territory at this point. Looking at where we are now in 2018, London prices may dip a little bit. They may stay where they are. 2019, again, looks likely that they will be falling a little bit, not too much, but the media will make headlines out of it, and there may be a little bit of panic around.
Yes, there certainly will be. But you really shouldn't be too concerned about what's happening in the property market, because in the wider economy, there may be more dramatic things at play, bigger events happening. When we actually look at the figures of 2019, I'm sure we'll see that in property prices, not a lot happened. In the wider economy, going on record for the first time, been saying this privately for a while now, I wouldn't be surprised if we go through a minor recession in 2019 and possibly a stock market crash. Something big enough to create headlines. This overall will make people feel pretty negative about all asset classes, including property. But actually, what happens to property prices isn't that dramatic at all.
2020.
Well, dips don't last forever. And in 2020, we expect to see things starting to smooth out a little bit and the beginning of some more positive sentiment. We're likely to see the domestic market waking up, and waking up in particular to the north being a strong area for capital growth. We've been talking about it for a long time. We were actually talking about it too early, but even you listening to this now are way ahead of the game when it comes to your knowledge about property. You're going to be ahead of the majority of people, and I think that realisation will start to come in 2020. Interest rates we've already talked about today. By 2020, we'd certainly expect them to have come up a little bit. And if the economy's starting to pick up, we'd expect them to rise a little more. That means mortgages more expensive than they are now, but still the banks will need to remain competitive. So I think we're likely to see a higher base rate, higher mortgage rates, but not dramatic, because there is going to be pressure to keep lending as banks start to get a sniff of the good times again and want to be doing plenty of business.
2021.
So buying heats up a little more now. And even London's returned to growth, which is great. But the strongest returns are in the major cities in the North and the Midlands. That's where the big capital growth gains are being made right now. Generally, for property, it's a great year. Things are buoyant, people are happy, and people are starting to see returns that we dreamed of for so long.
2022.
Right, now we're getting somewhere. The market is in full swing. Prices are going up, and the price increases from the previous year are starting to feed through. The media is getting wind of these and going crazy. After a very sleepy few years, property is now on the front pages again. We've already talked about growth in areas like Manchester, but non-prime areas in the north are starting to get a look in now. Only from investors, only people who are early, but that ripple effect is starting to take hold as areas that little bit further out start to look like comparatively better value and tempt investors in. So whereas previously we've seen pockets of growth in the most promising areas, this is the year when property more widely is back.
2023.
So this is where it gets a little bit crazy. Every man, woman, and even dog starts to call themselves a property investor. Woof. There is demand for property nationwide. Any area, any region, any type of property, it doesn't matter, because it seems you cannot go wrong in this market. And the banks are being very clever because they're getting creative to make sure they can take advantage of this boom. Yes, we have more regulation now, but banks won't want to miss this opportunity, and the government will probably turn a blind eye because everyone's feeling wealthy. So this will result in interesting lending products that allows more people to access the market than ever before.
Yeah, this is where the masses come in. That's the distinction. So property investors have had a busy couple of years, but this is where everyone's piling in and buying up pretty much anything. So when we talked about the property cycle before, we've talked about how the earliest growth and the strongest growth happens to prime properties in prime areas. If you've been buying good stuff in the right areas, you've already by this point had a few years of growth. This year is the turning point where everything really starts to grow and everything is in demand because everyone just wants to buy something. This is when estate agents have got their swagger back and you're seeing sealed bids even on really run-of-the-mill properties. You'll probably remember this from last time round if you're old enough. There's massive competition for even like really unexciting studio flats in secondary areas and things like that.
The attraction of capital growth for whatever you buy will mean that investors are comfortable to buy in pretty much any area, but also yield chasing. So yields would all but have disappeared now. In all but the best areas, yields have gone. So people will go to areas that they probably wouldn't even have considered walking through a few years earlier, are now going after for investment purposes because they're trying to chase the last of the yields, get that little bit of cash flow. A good strategy? Possibly not. But people will do it regardless. And talking of the people, expect to see some social anxiety as well to be felt during this period. No revolution, but there will be talk in the media of how things have become unbalanced and unfair. The relative ease to accessing credit, however, will mean that those noises will be fairly muted for the time being, as the majority of people, if they want to, can get into the property market right now.
2024.
So if you thought last year was bonkers, well, get ready for this. 2024 is crazy. There are people making large sums of money in short periods of time through flips and all the more aggressive property tactics and strategies. These success stories are only going to fuel the market further when people are reading about huge money-making deals left, right and centre. If anybody hasn't invested in property yet or considered it, pretty much the whole of the UK's adult population is now having a look. And some people may have stepped away from the market at this point, and in 2024, podcast listeners, that should be you. But there are people in there making a lot of money. And if you're very brave, you can go for it too. But as long as you understand that the market is absolutely overstretched right now. There's a talk of a bubble bursting, but others will start to say, oh, this time it's different. There will be no crash.
Yes, in property cycle terms, this is the winner's curse. You'll see back-to-back property shows on the TV. New ambitious projects and tallest buildings will be announced at this point. These are all markers. Things are getting very stretched. People are buying things they shouldn't be buying, but they're allowed to do so because of this easy credit that's going to keep the party going for now. At the same time, this social anxiety that we've hinted at before is going to be heating up as well. There's some attention now on the divide between the haves and the have-nots. This is going to be massively amplified by 2024. People who've already got property assets and people who've got access to this cheap credit are going to be, on the face of it, doing brilliantly and feeling very wealthy, while a lot of other people are left behind. But it's called the winner's curse for a reason.
2025.
The music stopped, the lights have gone up, and it turns out things are pretty ugly. Yep, the property market that we thought was gorgeous actually turned out to be a bit rough. So what happens? We have a crash, and things are pretty grim. Market's in freefall, people are panicking. Clearly, we forgot all the lessons and we got ourselves back in this pickle, only to get ready for another 18-year property cycle. Now, it's worth saying that it may not be 2025. It may be a year either way. I don't think it'll be much either way, though. And the severity of this crash, well, we'll wait and see. And I think we'll be far more qualified nearer the time to talk about it. I think we've been brave enough today, Rob, talking about what's coming up in the future already.
Yeah, and what we're certainly not in a position to predict right now is what the trigger for that bubble bursting is going to be. Last time there was an obvious big cataclysmic event. That's not necessarily going to be the case. By the time we get to 25, the market will have been completely irrational for at least a year. People will be doing things that don't make any sense, underpinned by this cheap credit. It's all about confidence and momentum, and that's very fragile. It doesn't have to be something big, but something just needs to come along and give people a bit of a jolt and realise that what they're doing is completely nuts, and that is when things turn. And as we've seen in the past, when things turn, they do it very quickly. Just as you're thinking that it's going to go on forever, things change practically overnight. So in years to come, if you're ever feeling uncharitable towards us and you want to discredit us, this is the episode to remind us of, because we are absolutely guaranteed to be wrong about the majority of this, especially about the exact timing, because it's impossible to predict this far out with any kind of accuracy. This is just how history suggests that things might play out. You can't get locked into an idea. We can say now what we think is going to happen, but you've got to look at the evidence around you and adjust as you go along. The power of the property cycle, and the reason why we've been talking about this for the last 2 weeks, the power is that it gives you a framework for thinking about property and thinking about the wider economy. A framework for looking at what's happening and interpreting those events in the context of what's happened in the past and has happened for hundreds of years. So the point is that as we go through each of these years, you can be looking at what's happening and not take it at face value and think, okay, what's likely to happen next? What indicators am I seeing? And it'll give you the confidence to make bold decisions. It will allow you to buy at the right time when everyone else is scared. It will allow you to go against the market and deleverage and step away at the right time. I really wish that I'd known about the property cycle last time round, because I would have done certain things very differently and I would have been in a far better position today as a result. So there's going to be good times ahead, there's going to be really bad times ahead, but I'm really excited to see how it all plays out, because I'm confident that this time we'll be in a position to really take advantage of it.
So it's review time, and it's time for us to give thanks to these wonderful hubbers who've left us reviews. Thank you so much. First up is Glyn. And Glyn says, having my interest in property piqued by a purchase of Rob D's landlord book, I am now hooked. My Amazon account has been hit by lots of book purchases to support my growing interest. This is a great podcast that supports, challenges, and gives simple advice to complex issues. Can't thank both Robs enough for their efforts. Thank you, Glyn. And next one is RD100. Rob, you're going to have to use more creative names if you're going to leave us a review. And RD100 says, great podcast, guys, keep up the good work. Free content delivered in a witty, informative style. This podcast has led me to seek my own property investments, which is something I wanted to do for a while. Your podcast gave me the extra push I needed, and Rob's book are a great source of info too. Are you sure this isn't you?
Well, while we're in the business of predictions, I think next week RD101 is going to have some very flattering things to say about us. Okay, hope you enjoyed this week and last week's episode. Hopefully you'll now have the property cycle concept fully solidified in your mind and you'll be excited rather than fearful about what's to come. In the short term, you should definitely be excited, because coming up next week, we've got a very special episode. If property for you is more than a passing interest, it's more than something you're doing on the side, and you want to have the opportunity to become one of the most knowledgeable people in the country about property and really make a career out of property, I won't say any more, but I'll just say that you definitely want to be listening next Thursday.
So make sure you join us for that and Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. But until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.